breaking and entering, drunk and disorderly, law and order. A former prosecutor and a defence lawyer, not your typical pairing. And the result? Conversations about crime and punishment that are guaranteed to get you thinking.
Welcome to Justice Matters with Joe Crowley and Lizzie Green, a brand new weekly podcast. Our episodes are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify and YouTube. Check out our Instagram for clips at Justice Matters Pod. Enjoy the episode. This episode contains descriptions of murder, sexual offences and offences against children. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, Joe.
Hello, Lizzie. I love your green top.
I know I do wear a lot of green. I love it.
It's your surname.
And actually, I'm matching your tie again.
I know. We matched today, and I noticed your nail polish.
Oh, yes.
Which is great for those watching on YouTube.
Little green tip.
Yes.
Splash of colour.
I know. We're very Irish today. It was not even St. Patrick's Day.
I know.
Anyway.
So today's episode isn't quite like some of our others because it's a bit more of a straightforward storytelling episode.
I'm all in favour of that. I love a good story.
Well, and this is a little bit gruesome. But I was prompted to write this one for two reasons. Firstly, because one of my students told me about one of the cases I'm going to talk about, the Ken and Barbie killers.
Yes.
And said she thought I would find it interesting. And gosh, she was right. So thank you to Alison.
Yes.
Or Kelly. Both of them, I think. Canadian students.
Yes.
And secondly, I am writing a lecture at the moment about liability for crimes as a party.
Yes.
You know, if you maybe aren't the primary offender, but you've played some part, how do you create liability?
Yes.
And I started thinking about couples who kill.
Yes.
And I did a little digging, and honestly, I cannot believe how many people who A, are psycho enough to commit these crimes, but B, find another person who wants to be part of that. Like, I don't know how they find each other. And so I thought, I'm just going to go back through history and look at the most notorious couples who kill.
Couples who kill. And this might be a two-parter if you...
Well, I have a lot of notes, so if you can handle all of the information.
I can handle it. Strap in.
And I don't want to be gratuitous about the descriptions of the offending, but also I think it just, to know what these people were capable of and what they did, and to think that two people were of a like mind more than once, you know, like to have so many examples.
Yeah.
Just think, what is the problem there?
No, I know. Well, I'm interested to know, you've gone and done a bit more of a deep dive on the case of Makin and the Attorney General of New South Wales, which was the case I mentioned a couple of episodes ago.
Yes, episode 27, where we talked about similar fact evidence.
Yeah.
And you told us about Sarah Jane and John Makin.
Yes.
And so they are my starting point.
Oh, are they? Okay. Oh, good. Well,
the earliest case, they've all got little monikers, these couples who kill.
That you've given them?
No, officially.
Wow.
Or, you know, in the resources I've looked at. Yeah. So Sarah and John Makin were also known as the baby farmers.
The baby farmers. Okay.
So 1871. So they got married in 1871.
Yes.
And over the course of their marriage, they had 10 children together.
Yes.
And then sometime in the late 1880s, John lost his job. And so he and Sarah became baby farmers.
Right.
That is, they were caring for illegitimate children in exchange for money, sort of like a precursor to foster care.
Right.
And they did that in relation to a number of infants.
Yes.
So that was their business.
Yeah.
You know, they were original style foster carers.
Yes.
It all came crumbling down.
Yes.
In 1892, when an 18-year-old called Amber Murray placed an advertisement in the Sydney Morning Herald in search of a mother to adopt her baby boy. She was unable to care for her illegitimate son, Horace, and so she was looking for this sort of an arrangement where she could pay someone else to care for her baby. And so the Makins replied that they were willing to take Horace in exchange for 10 shillings per week, which I'm not really sure what that translates to, but I don't think it was a lot.
No.
Anyway, one of their daughters, because even more unbelievably, their children had some knowledge of what was going on and were complicit to an extent. So anyway, their daughter Blanche accepted the upfront payment of £3 and picked up baby Horace.
Yes. How old baby Horace, do we know?
Oh, he was like weeks old, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The Makins continued to collect child support payments from Amber Murray, but kept making excuses as to why she couldn't see him, because part of the arrangement was that she could still see him.
Yeah.
It wasn't that she was signing away all parental rights. She just couldn't care for him.
Yes.
And so they kept making up excuses. And so she then took it upon herself to visit an address near Sydney that had been provided to her by the Makins, but they had absconded. They had moved instead to McDonald Town in New South Wales. Yeah. And poor Amber Murray never saw
Horace again.
Baby Horace again. Yeah, or not alive.
Yeah.
So that all happened in about May. And then in October of that same year, 1892, there was a man called James Hannany, and he was clearing a clogged underground drain in the backyard of a home in Burren Street, McDonald Town.
Yes.
And he found it blocked with the remains of 2 infant children. So investigators examined the records to trace the Makins, who by this time had moved on again to a place called Chippendale. And the Makins and 4 of their daughters were arrested.
Wow.
Though only John and Sarah ended up getting charged.
Yeah.
And the police exhumed the remains from the backyards of 11 homes that the Makins had occupied since 1890.
Wow.
And they found a total of 12 dead infant bodies.
Wow.
Some sources say 13, but 12 seems to be the most consistent number.
Yeah.
Prosecutors believe that the Makins sought to profit by taking in the babies for childcare payments and found it easier to kill the children and deceive the parents rather than actually caring for
the
them.
children. Yes.
In 1893, they were found guilty, and the charge was Horace Murray. So that was the primary charge there.
And the reason we discussed it was because the question for the court was, can the jury hear about the other 11?
And they could.
And they could. And that went all the way to the Privy Council in England, didn't
That's
it?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. They were eventually sentenced to death, and their 2 appeals and their plea for clemency were denied. So John Makin was hanged on the 15th of August, 1893. But Sarah, her sentence was commuted to life imprisonment with hard labour, and her daughters continually campaigned for her release, and she was actually paroled in 1911 after 19 years in prison.
Wow.
And according to court records, there was no further charges beyond that one of Horace.
Yeah.
Even though they'd found all of those bodies.
Interesting.
So she died in 1918. Now, this is like a landmark case because of the evidence rules that we talked about, but also I found out that it led the New South Wales Legislative Assembly to initiate the Children's Protection Act of 1892 to bring the care of orphaned and destitute children under state control.
Yeah, well, because I remember when I first raised it, you asked about, some, and I said there wasn't any,
no
government
formal processes.
Yeah, so it was all.
It's a shame it took
laissez-faire. Yeah,
feral people like them.
Yes.
So that was my first little dig into killer couples.
Yes.
So,
are we going chronologically?
Yes.
Oh, wacko.
There is a little bit of a gap now to 1947.
Okay.
We have a plethora of them that come after that.
I suppose the world's busy with World War I and World War II in the intervening years.
Yes, possibly. Yeah.
All right. Post World War II, they start investigating these things a bit more.
1947. Mm-hmm. So we've got Martha Beck and Raymond Fernandez, who were also known as the Lonely Hearts Killers.
Oh, is this Australia?
No, US.
Yeah, the name Fernandez doesn't sound like an Australian name in 1947.
Okay, but so I like how they find each other. Like if someone suggested to me, let's start, committing rapes and murders, I'd be like, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Anyway, so this one. So Raymond Fernandez was a con man.
Okay.
And he responded to a Lonely Hearts ad that had been placed in the paper by a woman called Martha Beck.
Right.
After realizing she wasn't quite as rich as he had thought, he left her.
Yes.
But Martha still pursued him.
Okay.
All the way into the next year. She really liked him.
Wow.
He finally told her that he was a con man and that he swindled money out of...
Wow. He finally had to admit to get rid of her. Listen, I'm a con man.
Swindled women out of their money. Tells her that.
Straight up front.
Instead of running away,
she says,
she asked to be his accomplice.
That's wow.
Like, that is, blinded by love. Not that it could have been love. Anyway, so they went on to swindle and kill somewhere between 3 to 17 women over the next year.
Wow.
Under the guise of being brother and sister.
Wow.
Yes.
Over the next year. They are working very quickly.
Very quickly. So that was 1948. She was still pursuing him. They were executed in 1951. Super quick, the whole thing.
Yeah. Wow.
So they were found guilty of first-degree murder eventually, sentenced to death via the electric chair.
Yeah.
So let me tell you about them. So Martha herself.
Yes.
Not that it's relevant, but reports say she was extremely overweight and unattractive.
Right.
And she joined the Lonely Hearts Club that had been advertised in a romance magazine.
Okay.
Her first letter she ever got was from Fernandez.
Wow.
So made a big impact.
Okay.
After World War II, he had suffered a serious head injury in an accident that left him bald and suffering from serious headaches.
Oh.
And so he became a petty criminal. He wore a cheap black toupee to cover up his baldness.
Yes.
And he convinced himself that he had a power over women that could turn them into his sex slaves.
Wow.
Yeah, quite the blow to the head.
Okay. Sorry, is it because of the blow to head he came up with that?
Well, I'd like to think so.
Okay,
Seems to have all been triggered by his injury.
Yeah. Right.
So he found his first lonely mark, his first mark in a Lonely Hearts Club in 46.
Oh,
so
okay.
Even before he'd responded to Martha.
Yes.
And he dated this first older woman until he had gained her trust enough to loot her bank account.
Nice.
And then he left her.
Okay, so he this is all he has to go into the bank presumably with some document signed by her. And
Yeah. And I should have said at the start, I get a lot of criticism for my attitude, a lot of criticism through comments on the podcast for my attitude towards men and, the male offenders.
Right.
I can tell you right now, we are looking at some really heinous female offenders today. They definitely have their place.
Yeah. In the pantheon of horrible people. Right, okay.
So he was just doing swindling before he joined forces with Martha. So if we want to think about who is the driving force there.
So she convinces him to kill them as well.
Hard to say, but he wasn't killing before they joined forces. Okay. So take from that what you will.
Yeah, okay.
He responded to her note with the intention of conning her. Didn't work because she wasn't rich. They did have a brief affair. When she pursued him and said, I want to be your accomplice, apparently they fell in love. And so over the next 2 years.
2 years. But it's quick.
But it all happens very quickly.
And we don't know how many. It was between 3 and 17, did you say?
Yes.
That's a big disparity of numbers.
So she would pose as his sister while he would seduce older women before stealing from them.
Right.
By 1949, they had murdered one victim and killed another accidentally with an overdose of sleeping pills. And the end came when Fernandez hooked up with a younger woman in Michigan, and this woman became a bit suspicious of the whole brother and sister thing.
Yeah, because presumably they didn't look very much alike.
No. And although she allowed them to move into her home, she refused to marry him immediately and provide him access to her funds. And Martha got jealous and tired of waiting, and so they killed her and her 2-year-old daughter and buried them in the basement. So police officers searched the home and found the makeshift grave. They confessed pretty quickly in the belief that their lives were safe in the non-capital punishment state of Michigan.
Wow.
But they didn't count on being extradited to New York, where the electric chair was an option. At the last minute, they attempted an insanity defense, but were unable to convince the jury, convicted, sentenced to death and executed.
Well, I'm going to put it out there. I'm against the death penalty in all situations.
But I am too.
But sorry, let me understand for a boring law reason. So the offence occurs in New York, but they're apprehended in Michigan. Is that what happens?
No, I think that they connected it to, they hooked up with a younger woman in Michigan. So that offence occurred in Michigan.
And they had another offence that occurs in New York.
So that was the Lonely Hearts Killers.
The Lonely Hearts Killers. So we've had the Baby Farmers, the Lonely Hearts Killers. Who's our next couple?
Next one, 1961. Okay. We've got Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, who were also known as the Moors murders, their crimes.
I'm taking that this is from England.
England, yes.
Okay. On the Moor.
Yes. So again, we're talking young people who find their way to each other.
Yeah.
So 1961, 18-year-old Myra Hindley meets Ian Brady, and I don't know how, but they soon discovered they shared a perverse inclination and desire to rape, torture, and kill young children.
Wow.
Not sure how that comes up in conversation.
No.
So she met Ian Brady. She became infatuated with him.
Okay.
And after a year, they began a love affair. They lived together in her grandfather's house.
Right.
Ian Brady was obsessed with Nazi philosophy, and he and Hindley began reading books together on Nazi atrocities.
Right. Oh.
Throughout the 60s, they abducted 5 children between the ages of 10 and 17, the most infamous or most well-known being 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey, and they left their bodies in the Saddleworth Moors of England. The body of their second youngest victim, Keith Bennett, was never found. Both Hindley and Brady were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for the murders of 2 of the victims, with Brady also convicted of a 3rd murder and Hindley convicted as an accessory to that murder.
Right.
And they were still only 23 and 28 at the time.
Wow.
So young.
How did they find out the number of victims? Just because of the number of bodies found on the moors?
I can tell you the little stories. So they began their killings in 63 after Brady told Myra Hindley that he wanted to commit the perfect murder. And she was like, great, let's do it.
Okay.
The first murder was committed in July 1963. The victim was 16-year-old Pauline Reed. So it was Hindley, the woman, Myra, who persuaded Pauline on her way to a dance to get into her car to help her look for a glove. She used that repeatedly.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And while in the car, shuts the door, drives off or something?
Yep. So she drove to Saddleworth Moor on the edge of Manchester, and Brady arrived on his motorbike. They'd prearranged it. Yeah. She was sexually assaulted and her throat was cut twice and her body was buried on the moor. So they didn't find her body until 1987.
Wow.
When they finally confessed to that murder. Brady told police that Hindley had participated in the sexual abuse on that very first occasion, but she claimed she had waited in the car until he came back to show her the teenager's body. So they weren't in agreement as to the role she played.
Yes.
So that was July. November in the same year, 12-year-old John Kilbride was lured from a market in Ashton-under-Lyne, where he'd been earning some pocket money, and it was again Hindley who lured him into the car, offering him a lift home. They then suggested a detour to the moors, saying that they had to look for a lost glove. He was never seen again, and his body was not found until October 65. He had also been sexually assaulted and strangled. In June of the next year, they killed their 3rd victim. So this was 12-year-old Keith Bennett, and his matter still comes up in the media because they've never found his body. So it's been nearly 60 years. There was renewed interest in 2022 because this journalist or author and investigator, a guy called Russell Edwards, said he believed he'd found the remains of Keith Bennett, and he took it to the police and they opened up the case again and initiated a new search. I think it was very thorough in the Greater Manchester Police station took a hold of that, but they never found anything. So it's still open. And his mother, She died in 2012. She had spent her entire life since he went missing looking for him, even going to the moor herself with a spade.
Oh.
I know, so sad.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was lured into Hindley's Mini.
Yes.
As he was walking to his grandmother's house. Familiar pattern. The three of them ended up going on a detour to windswept Saddleworth Moor.
So how do they connect that murder to these two? Do they admit to it?
They make confessions.
Okay.
Yeah. So Hindley said Brady told her he sexually assaulted and strangled Keith.
Again, so she maintains this idea she's in the car and he just does the killings and the sexual. Okay. That obviously, she gets convicted of some of them.
She got convicted of 2.
As a principal murderer.
As a principal offender.
Yeah, principal offender. Yeah.
So Winnie Johnson, the mother of Keith Bennett, actually pleaded with Brady himself to reveal the details of Keith's death, but he refused to provide any information. So just
admitted to the killing and then that was it.
Didn't say anything else. Yeah. All right, so that was June 64. December 64, little 10-year-old Leslie Downey was murdered.
Yeah.
So she was taken from a fairground on Boxing Day and she was taken to their home.
Okay.
And she was tied up, stripped and forced to pose for photographs.
Oh.
They recorded her begging for her life.
Oh.
It went for 16 minutes and she pleaded before she was killed, "Don't undress me, will you? And I want to see Mummy." Just the saddest thing. And that was played in full in the courtroom when they were on trial for her murder.
They resisted that one. And the ages seem to be getting younger. They start at 16, then 12, 10. Now we're down to 10.
Yeah. So she was also buried on the moors, the same moors. And then, well, just to prove you wrong, in October 65, 17-year-old Edward Evans was murdered. So he was lured back to their house from a railway station. But see, this is where it all fell apart because he was killed in front of Myra Hindley's brother-in-law. Now, this guy, David Smith, wasn't, he had a criminal history himself, not for anything like this.
No.
And they were trying to actually recruit him into the business.
Yes.
And so he saw Edward Evans being bludgeoned 14 times with a hatchet. And then he was strangled. Now, Smith left the house. He went home and he just could not cope with what he had seen.
Yeah.
And so he did call the police and they found Edward Evans' body wrapped in a plastic sheet and they found the murder weapon.
At the house?
Yeah.
Right.
And so then they were arrested.
Okay. So at this stage, nobody knows about all the other ones. They just know about this one.
Yeah, this was what was their undoing.
Yes.
Yeah. So they searched through the house.
Yeah.
They found Brady's books on sadism and perversion, found plans on how to dispose of Evans' body on the moors. They found the name John Kilbride in some of the notebooks.
Right.
Leslie and Downey's body was eventually found in October. John Kilbride was discovered a week and a half later. And they also tracked down 2 suitcases owned by Brady at the railway station that had been left there with a luggage ticket.
Yes.
And these contained photos of Leslie Ann Downey and the tape of her pleading for her life.
Yeah.
So they had plenty for Edward Evans and Leslie Ann Downey and John.
Yes.
So they pleaded not guilty in April 1966, but Brady got convicted. He got 3 concurrent life sentences.
Yeah.
And Hindley received 2 life sentences plus 7 years as an accessory. And they narrowly escaped the death sentence because it had been abolished the year before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In 85, they confessed to the killing of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett. They did go with police to the moors to help search for those bodies, but they were never found.
No.
Or Keith's were never found. Pauline's were found in 87. Brady spent his final years on a hunger strike, being force-fed at Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital.
Wow.
And Hindley died in prison of pneumonia. So they're both dead now.
Yes.
So Myra Hindley was known as the most evil woman in Britain. She always maintained that her abusive lover made her do it.
Yes.
Doctors diagnosed him as a psychopath, before his death. And in the 1990s, she claims she took part in the killings only because he had drugged her. It all goes against their modus operandi, I have to say, where she was very much the instigator.
When you say the instigator, I mean she's the one who's luring the children.
Yeah, she would have. I mean, if you're drugged, how much can you do?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's those two.
So you did say, but they're the Moore killers because they leave the bodies on the moor, right? Okay.
And so I'd heard that before. I think I've listened to a podcast episode on them. There's a lot more detail you can get about.
Well, not that you'd want it.
No, not that you'd want it, but they were really
horrible.
They're held up as one of the worst. She in particular.
Well, you've got, the Valmay Beck in the Sian Kingi murder, but that's only one. I know that one well because it's a Queensland case. But you've got the Wests, haven't you? Are they next?
Now, they're next.
Yeah, they've got to be. My recollections, they're pretty bad.
And Rosemary West, in this case, there is no doubt of the role she played in these many murders.
And again, this is England, isn't it?
Yeah, this is England as well.
Yeah.
So this is 1972. Okay. Fred and Rosemary West and the House of Horrors.
Yeah. Is that what it's called? The House of Horrors. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this couple first met waiting for the bus in Cheltenham in early 1969. Fred was 27 at that time. He was already married. Inconveniently to a woman called Catherine Costello.
Yes.
She had left him the year before and taken her 2 daughters, but legally he was still married.
Right.
Rosemary West, at that time, 15-year-old Rose Letts, that was her name before this.
Sorry, he's 27, she's 15.
Yep.
They meet at a bus stop.
Yep. Okay. And she had left her job at a bakery shortly after she met him. And she moved in to be a full-time nanny to his 2 daughters he'd shared with Catherine, Charmaine and Anne-Marie. There had been another young woman looking after his children, 18-year-old Anne McFall, but she had disappeared in 1967. No one had reported her missing.
Wow.
Yes. And in 1968, a teenage waitress also vanished who had known Fred.
Wow.
And nothing came of that either. But anyway...
So she was potentially a victim when she first moves in as the nanny.
Well, she wasn't moving into a safe space, I wouldn't have thought. Yes. So her parents very much disapproved of her moving in with Fred West to the point where they intervened. And so she got placed in a home for troubled teens.
Wow, okay.
But she left that at the age of 16 and moved in with Fred.
Okay.
So Anne-Marie, who was her mother, has been quoted as saying, "It was obvious from the word go that Rose had a hell of a temper and was not able to control it. She made us do most of the household chores despite our ages, and if we didn't do them right, she erupted."
Wow.
So she was always volatile.
Yeah.
Now they had a child together. Well, they had many children, but their first child was born in 1970, and the following year, while Fred was in the middle of a prison sentence, because he was also a criminal in other ways.
Yeah, besides being a serial killer, he committed other crimes?
Yes, motoring offences and theft from his employer. So he's in prison.
Yeah.
And his daughter Charmaine disappeared.
No.
So
while he's in prison, the daughter disappears?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And Rosemary's still the nanny, or is the nanny?
Well, they've had a child together by now.
Wow.
So they're together. And she was the carer of
the
first 2 children.
Right.
Yeah. That was possibly the first action by Rosemary.
Yes.
That we are concerned with.
Yes.
So they actually got married in 1972. So Charmaine disappeared in 71.
Wow, okay.
So they got married.
How old's Charmaine? 5, something like that. Pretty young still.
Yeah, I think... I don't know how old she was. I think they were a little bit older, maybe closer to 10.
Okay.
Yeah. The sister said they couldn't work out exactly when she had disappeared, but she had been treated for an ankle injury in March of 71. So it was sometime after that she went missing.
So this is the sister who survives, presumably years later, and has asked questions about it.
Yes. to any requests that came in about Charmaine, they said she'd gone off with her mother, Catherine.
Why isn't her mother, Catherine, asking questions?
Well, Catherine also disappears.
Wow.
Okay, so they had a second daughter, also in 1972, and the children who were living in the house and were older said that at that time, Rosemary was engaging in sex work in the house. But the police did not have her on their records as any kind of a prostitute. Right. She wasn't known to them.
Right.
They said later on that no one was allowed into the house with Dad or Rose's permission. This was the children.
Yeah.
Not even the playmates from school. And the children were the subject of sexual abuse within the house. How did it all come about that they got caught?
Yep.
So there was a number of different victims, but it wasn't until 92, after an anonymous tip regarding the sexual abuse of one of the daughters, that the police really got invested in their situation and took on the investigation.
Yeah. So these are the daughter of Rosemary and Fred together.
And one of them was the daughter of Catherine and
right.
Fred.
But they'd be pretty old by 92. They're in
well, she'd already run away from home and she gave a statement to the police.
Okay.
The offences that they ended up facing related to, firstly, back from 1973, assault occasioning actual bodily harm and indecent assault for a woman called Carolyn Owens. So she'd been the nanny for a short time frame and they picked her up when she was hitchhiking home. They took her back to their house to abuse her and she escaped. She went to the police, but they didn't really pursue it.
Oh, wow.
The Wests got a warning. They were fined £25 each for their conduct on that occasion.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was
different times, certainly.
Very different times. That was January 73. In April 73, a girl called Linda Goff became the first sexually motivated killing that they committed. And then they killed at least 8 more women.
Wow. So what, in the house?
Yeah.
And then my recollection was they buried the bodies.
So they would take in lodges. Rosemary was performing sex acts and some of the lodges would as well, I think.
Okay.
And then they would subject these lodges to torture, to sexual abuse and eventually to death.
Yeah.
Heather West was a 16-year-old who was last seen in 1987 in June. She was never reported missing. A lot of these women weren't reported missing.
Yeah, well, because they're sort of loners
transient.
Okay, lost touch with their family and stuff.
Yeah. The children in the house wondered where she'd gone and they were told that she'd packed up and left. But then one day someone in the family said, kind of as a joke, suppose Dad killed Heather and buried her in the garden. And it was said as a joke, but the idea took hold.
Wow.
And the more they thought about it, the more they started to wonder if it could possibly be true. So they repeated those comments in front of a social worker who prompted the police to investigate that particular joke. And turns out there were people buried in the backyard.
Yeah.
Yes. So that search took place in 1994. And the police interviewed both Rose and Fred, but they found 9 sets of remains.
9
in the
And
backyard.
did they identify them all?
Yeah, they did identify them all. And then Charmaine West and her mother, Catherine Costello, and another woman were all found in different areas.
Wow. So he killed his own daughter, his first wife.
And all of these women who entered their lives for these transient periods of time.
Yeah.
But I think there was no doubt Rosemary was a driving force here. I mean,
why do you say driving force?
Well, he was often away. Okay, so not a driving force. I think he was.
Because by the sounds of it,
he was definitely.
He'd committed a couple of murders before they even get together.
Yes, ready for that kind of conduct. But she certainly didn't, She pleaded not guilty to the charges of murder.
Yeah.
With her defense claiming she'd been largely unaware of his actions and she'd been manipulated by him to keep quiet.
Okay.
But the prosecutors alleged that they were in it together, that Fred had found the perfect companion and that the victim's last moments on earth were as objects of the sexual depravity of this woman and her husband.
Wow, okay.
After a trial that lasted more than a month, she became the second woman in the UK in modern times to be given a whole life tariff.
Wow.
Meaning no possibility of parole or conditional release.
Wow. And was the other one the earlier woman from the Moore murders?
Hindley.
Don't know.
Well, she got consecutive life sentences.
Oh, so, yeah, okay.
Yeah. In 1996, the house where they had lived in was demolished.
Yes. The House of Horrors.
The House of Horrors. What happened to them? So she was still in prison at age 70 at a prison in West Yorkshire. One of her children said she's a hypocrite. She became quite high and mighty in prison, intervening in our lives. Her death will be the next thing, and I suppose she might make a deathbed confession.
Wow.
Okay. So no love lost there.
No.
I mean, again, I've read so much about these guys. There was some suggestions that they actually ran a brothel, but this was done mostly while Fred was either in prison or away working. So that was Rosemary, who was taking in the women, allowing the prostitution to occur, participating herself. So she was very much instrumental in finding the women who went on to become the victims.
Yeah. What did he work as? What was his job?
Well, I don't know.
Something that made him travel.
Yeah. He was away. I think he was more away for prison than other things.
Okay.
But she also was very aggressive with her own children in terms of very physical with her reprimands. One of her sons, apparently she grabbed him around the throat and nearly throttled him unconscious on one occasion.
Wow.
He was questioned about it at school and said he'd been playing with a rope around his neck and he fell, and they just didn't pursue that at all. They just accepted it. So, foul, like really depraved.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so she's still alive?
Well, I couldn't find that she died. The last report was that she was 70 odd.
Yeah.
So I guess she might have died by now. I don't know. The detective in charge of the investigation was officially reprimanded down the track because she tried to sell her story to a publisher for $1.5 million.
Wow.
But that did not go well. Rose has taken to writing poetry for her children in prison.
Jeepers. Okay.
Yes. I love you like the birds and bees. I love you like the flowers sweet. I love you like the deep blue seas and memories dear to keep.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Don't know what memories she's keeping, but
I don't think Hallmark's buying that and putting it on a card.
No, I don't think the children are buying it either. No. All right, so that was the second English horror.
So we've had the US, we've had Australia, US, British case.
Yeah, I think we are back to Australia. Yes, Catherine and David Burney.
Oh, okay, I don't know about them.
Well, similar name but different, the Morehouse murders.
Oh, okay.
So this is Western Australia.
Right.
So we're in 1985. So Catherine Burney left her husband and her 7 children to reunite with her childhood sweetheart, David Burney. Oh, so she was Catherine McLaughlin.
Right.
And wanted to get back with her childhood sweetheart, David Burney, so that the two of them could live out their depraved sexual fantasies.
Wow.
These people who find each other, I tell you.
Okay.
Over the span of 5 weeks, so again, very quick, they abducted, raped and murdered 4 women.
Oh.
And the 5th victim escaped before she could be killed, and that was their undoing.
Yes.
So they were aged, all of the victims were aged between 15 and 31.
Oh, okay.
And they were found guilty and sentenced to 4 life sentences. So happy ending to that story. David Burney hung himself in his cell about 20 years after he was sentenced. Catherine Burney is still in prison.
In Western Australia?
In Western Australia.
Okay.
So let me tell you about these people. All right. So Catherine Burney's relationship with David Burney stretched way back to their early teens. That's when they first met.
Yeah.
They were born within a couple of months of each other in 1951. They didn't know each other then.
Oh.
They both had fairly difficult childhoods. So David Burney was the first of 5 children. His mother was an alcoholic. He had a physically handicapped father. And they lived in what was then a semi-rural suburb in eastern Perth.
Right.
Rumours about incest within his family had been spread around. The Burney house was filthy. Mrs. Burney swore and was ill-kempt, which I guess in those times was very much frowned upon.
Yep, okay.
She didn't cook for the family, and she was known to exchange sexual favours with taxi drivers in lieu of payment.
Okay.
Better than Mallard, cab jumping.
Is that what I called it? Cab jumping?
I can't remember. So then the Burneys moved suburbs and they moved next door to the Harrisons.
Okay.
And lonely, motherless 12-year-old Catherine lived there with her relatives.
Right.
So when she was only 2 years old, her mother had died, giving birth to her baby brother, who then also died. Catherine moved to South Africa, where she was abused by her father. She was then taken back to Perth by her maternal grandparents. But when her strict and quite isolating grandmother suffered from an epileptic fit, Catherine was shipped off to her aunt and uncle in the inner suburbs of Perth.
Right.
David Burney turned up next door. So living next door to each other, around the age of 14, they started a sexual relationship.
Jeepers.
David Burney apparently was a brilliant conversationalist.
Okay.
He'd read everything from politics to science to the Egyptian pyramids, and Catherine was enthralled.
Right.
She thought he was amazing.
Yeah.
But after 10 years of welfare officers repeatedly turning up at the Burney household, the neglected Burney children were finally all removed from their parents' care and sent to different foster homes.
Okay.
And so David and Catherine lost touch for a little while.
Right.
So meanwhile, Catherine got married, had 7 children.
7 children, yeah.
Was living still in Perth.
Yes.
It was the late 1960s when they met up again. In 1969, when they were both 18, they both faced the Perth Police Court, charged with break, enter and steal of a safe at a local drive-in theatre.
Wow.
David went to prison. Catherine, who was at that time pregnant to another man, was put on probation. And when David was released, he teamed up with her and they committed more thefts.
Wow.
And he was returned to jail. So Catherine on that occasion was also imprisoned for 6 months in a detention centre. Her infant child was taken away. Behind bars, she was convinced by an officer that her life would be better without David when she was released. Her child was returned to her. She got a job as a nanny and a housekeeper with the McLaughlin family. Then she got pregnant to the youngest son of that family, and they were allowed to marry on her 21st birthday. So they had their 7 children, 6 living. Their eldest child was killed in their driveway by a car, and she witnessed that happening.
Oh.
Yeah.
And she's got a child that she'd had earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So by about 1983 then, David and Catherine started seeing one another again. They embarked on an affair.
Yeah.
In 85, she left her husband and her 6 living children.
Yeah.
The youngest was only 3 at that stage, and moved in with David.
Okay.
They were never legally married, but she did start taking his name.
Yeah, okay.
She saw herself as his husband, as his wife.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And so they moved into 3 Morehouse Street
Okay.
in Willagee, a working class Fremantle suburb.
Got it.
So David got a job selling car parts at a wrecker's yard.
Okay.
It was just a 4-minute drive from the house. He was known in that job as being reliable, trustworthy, happy-go-lucky, and intelligent.
Okay.
He did, however, do several more stints in prison for theft. And for whatever reason, he had begun having fantasies about rape and murder. So he told Catherine that if she helped him abduct, bind, and rape a young woman, she too would achieve maximum happiness.
Interesting. Well, she's obviously got she obviously gets something out of committing crime because they're going and doing break and enters together and stealing safes.
Well, and I accept they both had disadvantaged upbringings.
Yes.
But not everyone from a disadvantaged
upbringing does this kind of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of how do these couples find each other, I mean, that conversation, you know, I want to abduct and murder a young woman, it doesn't come out of the blue when you've got a history of committing crimes together. That's sort of
But you think how it started, just as kids living next to each other, and she thought he was so smart and intelligent.
Yeah.
How does it go to this? Anyway, she was a willing participant.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure if it was for herself that she was a willing participant or to keep him happy, but either way, she did not put up opposition to his
she's gone.
ideas.
They've had a relationship that involved committing criminal offences together. She's then separated from him. She's then got back together with him. I mean, she sort of knows, you know, that he likes committing criminal offences. So,
yeah. But theft's a big stretch to rape and murder.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But maybe it's the thrill of committing the crime or something, and to get the thrill, you need to commit worse and worse crimes. I don't know.
Well, they did commit worse and worse crimes.
Yeah.
So they committed their first murder in 1986. Oh. This was a 22-year-old, Mary Frances Nielsen, and David raped her while Catherine watched. Oh. They buried her in a shallow grave.
So they must be in about their 40s by this stage. Is that about right?
So 86. And what did I say? They were born in 51.
Oh, okay, yeah, so...
Late 30s.
Yeah, late 30s,
yeah.
All right.
2 weeks later, they picked up a 15-year-old hitchhiker, Susanna Candy. They held her and repeatedly raped her over several days. And apparently, David then told Catherine that she needed to prove that she loved him by killing Susanna.
Oh.
And so she did.
Jeepers.
A month later, they picked up their third victim, 31-year-old Nolene Patterson, whose car had broken down. She actually knew David.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
From his work in the garage, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, she was held for days and raped, but Catherine got jealous of Nolene because she thought that David actually liked her.
Right.
And so she held a knife to Nolene's throat and told David to choose her or me. And obviously David chose Catherine.
Yeah.
3 days after they murdered Nolene, they picked up 21-year-old Denise Brown, who accepted a lift from the couple after she had left a tavern one night. They held her for 2 days, raped her repeatedly, and then Catherine decided she'd had enough of her being alive, and the couple drove the victim to the Gangara pine plantation. This is really yuck. It was still daylight, and David Burney raped her again. When it got dark, Catherine held up a torch over the victim as David cut her neck and raped her at the same time.
Jeepers.
She wasn't dead yet, so they got a larger knife. Catherine got a larger knife from the car and David stabbed her with it.
Oh.
And it gets worse. They dug a shallow grave and put her in it. As they were tossing earth over her, she sat up and gasped for breath.
Jeepers.
So she still hadn't died. And so then she was hit over the head with his shovel. She was still alive. And so then he bludgeoned her with an axe.
Jeepers.
But then it all fell apart with their fifth victim.
Yeah.
So 17-year-old Kate Moyer, I think that's how you say it, was picked up by the couple while she was hitchhiking, and she was taken to their house. Again, she was repeatedly raped. She said Catherine sat and watched and took notes while David raped her. And she was given drugs, but she was pretty savvy, and so she only pretended to take the drugs. She would put them under her tongue and then spat them out. So she was never out of it altogether. And she thinks maybe that saved her life.
Yeah.
So David went into work on the Monday. So he's maintaining this life.
Yes.
And while he was at work, someone came to the door. And Catherine, for whatever reason, failed to re-secure Kate's bindings.
Wow.
And so while she was at the door, Kate escaped out a window. But before she left, she put her lipstick and a piece of paper with her phone number under the mattress to prove she had been there.
Wow.
jumps out the window, runs into the street and flagged down help and was taken straight to the police.
Wow.
They got arrested that day.
Wow, yeah.
David and Catherine Burney. After fairly lengthy interviews, David made admissions to the murders, like
all of them.
Yes.
Wow. Because I was going to ask you how they.
The couple took them to the graves.
Wow.
Yeah. So they pleaded guilty to the 4 murders and to the offences against Kate in 1987 and were sentenced to life in prison. In relation to David, the order of never to be released was added to his sentence, but there was a minimum term for Catherine that made her eligible for parole in 2007.
Wow. Did she get parole in 2007?
No. So David continued his violent temperament in prison. He was often in the middle of fights. He got beaten up. He spent a lot of time in the prison infirmary.
Yeah. I think it doesn't help to have a bad temper in jail.
No, not a wise move.
No.
Catherine revealed in her first full year of incarceration that she missed David very much and blamed herself for their capture. She said to one visitor, "I could have stopped that girl. I should have. But it all had to come to an end."
Interesting.
So for 4 years, they wrote to each other. A total of 2,600 letters were exchanged between the two of them.
That's is that more than a letter a day? My maths is so bad.
I can't work that out, but it's a hell of a lot of letters.
Yeah, it's about a letter a day. Yeah.
But then in 1990, David suffered a physical and mental breakdown, claiming that being away from Catherine was destroying him.
Jeepers, talk about a toxic relationship. Oh.
By 1997, Catherine stopped writing to him completely because she possibly thought she would have a better chance of parole if she had distanced herself from him. David was prescribed with antidepressants after she rejected him. There was some ridiculous administrative mix-up that meant for a short time he was not supplied with his medication, and in that time he committed suicide.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So now aged 72, Catherine is still alive in prison in WA. She has the dubious notoriety of being Western Australia's most high-profile serial killer.
Yeah.
She is the women's maximum security prison's longest-serving inmate, and while apparently hopeful for parole, she has been found in possession of a knife, and the police officers think she is a con artist and cunning, so she's not doing so well behaviourally.
Sure, but that's a long time to be applying for parole. 2007. I mean, that's almost 20 years.
Well, Perth KC, Tom Percy, has repeatedly called for her release because she is quiet as a church mouse and keeping her locked up is an exercise in pure revenge.
Yeah.
The chief investigating detective on the Burney case, Paul Ferguson, disagrees. He was quoted in the media as saying, "I honestly believe that woman has never given those victims 1 ounce of consideration, both the dead victims and the families of the victims. She's an actor. The person I met is all for herself and she will do whatever is necessary."
Yeah.
They were parasites who lived off each other, the most evil people I've ever come across.
Okay. All that's well and good, but it's up to the court to sentence. And the court identified parole in 2007. It just makes a mockery of a court's parole order to ignore it for, what are we on now?
You'll love this bit.
15 years, 16
years? You'll love
years?
this bit. So around the time she was due for another review of her parole, October 2018, the WA Attorney General introduced a new law into Parliament. This was John Quigley.
Yes, we've talked about John Quigley in our Andrew Mallard episode. Yes.
So he drafted new laws that meant rules allowing even the worst killers to apply for parole every 3 years would be scrapped. This meant persons convicted of 3 or more murders on the one day or 2 or more murders on different days could be banned for parole consideration for up to 6 years.
How many people would that apply to? That sounds very close to writing legislation to stop one particular person, which the High Court has said you can't do.
If you're thinking about like a person who kills their family, for example, that's more than one person in one day.
Right, okay.
So she's still in prison. The Burneys' sadistic crimes have been compared to the acts of the world's most heinous killer couples.
Sure, okay, but the judge knows all this on sentence. Well, as I say, it makes a mockery of a judge giving a parole
eligibility.
Sure,
that doesn't mean she has to get out at that time.
No, I know it means she doesn't have to get out, but
she hasn't behaved well in prison for all of that time.
Okay.
She made friends with another killer in prison and was facilitating communications between that person and someone else. I didn't want to go into all of that.
No, sure. Okay. So she hasn't been a model prisoner.
Poor choices in prison.
Okay. Still, it's a long time to be rejected on
little
parole.
remorse.
Okay. Well,
which is a factor in...
Sure. We didn't mention that. I mean, she stopped writing to her co-offender.
Oh, yeah, that was tactical.
Husband.
That was tactical.
Okay.
But so it does boggle my mind. I have left my favourite ones. I haven't got to them yet.
Okay, well, that's good because that can be our part 2.
If people can stomach it.
I'm not sure I can. I was interested in this topic and I'm really feeling a bit crook in the guts now.
Sorry.
It was I won't say roller coaster, right? Because I'm not sure there was any ups. It was just all down.
No, it's all downs apart from when they get caught.
That's a very small up.
Well, I know, but at least all of them did get caught.
That's right. I suppose the question is how many are out there that haven't been caught?
And how many other people with these proclivities find a like-minded person?
Yeah.
It boggles my mind.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
stay tuned.
We've got the Ken and Barbie killers.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
Okay.
And then Queensland's notorious Watson Beck.
Yeah, which is a case that I am familiar with, but I mean, it's a tough case, and I'm not sure. I mean, I can't. By jingoes, this is going to be a tough episode, the next one. Okay.
It is, but I do think it's important. I mean, I still teach the case of Beck.
It is legally, it's
important.
Yeah.
But that's what I said at the start. Like, it is different this episode.
You did warn us. I know. Give you that.
I know. I went down that rabbit hole and I took you all with me.
It was a hellhole. I don't think it was a rabbit hole. Oh, my God.
Well, go and have a cup of tea.
I will. All right. Thanks, Lizzie.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. You can find links to the cases that we discussed in the description. You can also find a link to Guardian Criminal Law, and a big shout out to them for making this podcast possible.
The majority of criminal cases involve people, normal people, people like you, people like me, who find themselves in an unusual set of circumstances that would not usually occur in their life. My name's Mark Savick and I'm here to assist you with your criminal matter. I look forward to hearing from you and being of assistance to you.
If you're interested in clips, you can look at them on Instagram and TikTok. Just search for Justice Matters Pod. See you next episode.